Well, hello and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast Elevenses, and this is show number 364, and it's Wednesday the 6th of September. And once again, I've got a news-packed show for you today, as well as a hint of what could possibly be a new bike on the way from Suzuki. So what have we got? We'll have a look at TfL, who've fined a rider who stopped when he got stung by a bee. We'll also look at TfL's claim that 9 out of 10 vehicles meet the ULEZ standard. Has been disputed. Sadly, French actor and director Mathieu Kassovitz has been seriously injured in a motorcycle crash in France. Tesla are under investigation again, this time for a new rollout of their autopilot feature. Minister and experts disagree on bike licenses in Malaysia, though. And the president of the Japan Motorcycle Manufacturers Association has warned of danger if motorcycles fail the technical revolution. And finally, Suzuki Pakistan, they have shut down powered two-wheeler production again, and we'll have a look at the possibility of a new GSXR on the way from Suzuki. And one item I realise I've left out of there, it's a 1000cc Chinese sports bike, which is liable to appear later this year. We'll have a look at that too in today's show, so plenty to talk about. Don't forget, if you have a question or a comment, anything you'd like to say, oops, that's the wrong button there, that one was the one I meant to show, do drop me a line. More than happy to answer any questions, try to make clear anything I say if you've got puzzles about it. And Terry and Christine have both looked in. Good to see you both. Right, so let's crack on with the show. The first story of the day is from London. That's the wrong picture. That's the one I wanted. There it is. And we'll get it down to the right size, and you'll be able to see me again, and you'll be able to see the banner. And this is one of those stories where you just think, what the hell? Imran Khan, 42, he received a penalty charge notice, a PCN, from Transport for London, TfL, because he stopped in a red route, a loading bay, after he was stung by a bee just below his left eye. Now, if anybody has been stung by a bee on the face whilst riding a motorcycle, you'll know it is somewhat discommoding. I remember very well being stung in Wales on the way to Aberystwyth one evening, and having to remove the helmet and the dying bee from my face. So it's not a trivial incident. He said he was stationary for just over a minute, and he thought that he was being responsible by coming to a halt, and was shocked to receive a £160 fine, reduced to £80 if paid within 21 days, of course. Now, he appealed, including sending photos of his swollen face to TfL. I looked like the Elephant Man for several days after I was stung. But his appeal was rejected, saying a bee sting wasn't a suitable reason to stop, and that the PCN had been correctly issued. Mr. Khan then escalated his appeal to an independent adjudicator, who did actually cancel the PCN, but not because he was stung by the bee. And it appears that this was due to a recent tribunal ruling, which has been kept pretty quiet actually, which actually decided that penalty charge notices issued by TfL for vehicles parked on red routes through CCTV camera evidence were unlawful. Government rules say they can only be issued by traffic wardens. Now, it's believed TfL will appeal for a judicial ruling at the High Court. Yes, and back to TfL again for my second story. They also say that 9 out of 10 cars seen driving in outer London on an average days meet the ULEZ rules, so they don't have to pay the charge. And so what they're saying basically is that the expansion of the ULEZ zone won't affect many people. But TfL's own data reveals that there are 2.6 million cars registered in London, and the DVLA, Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency, their figures obtained by the RAC, they show that around 700,000 of those cars are not compliant. So whilst those cars probably won't be in daily use, that's more like 1 in 4 cars than the 1 in 10 claim from TfL. And of course, remember, this figure doesn't take into account other vehicles such as minibuses, vans and lorries registered in Greater London, nor does it cover vehicles which enter London from neighbouring counties. So, put those two stories together, and I honestly think that TfL's marketing sort of arm really does shoot itself in the foot at times. They really ought to review some of these decisions in the light of how they'll be more widely received. Now, predictably, as it happens, of course, I can't find any data for motorcycles. But meanwhile, according to figures released by the Met Police on Friday last week, there were 222 reports of crimes relating to ULEZ cameras logged in the month, leading to its expansion across London, and that makes a total of 510 since the Met began collecting the data in April. Now, some of those numbers will actually, some of them will refer to multiple offences, multiple instances, and one group of ULEZ protesters claims to have damaged 900 cameras in the last few weeks. Now, French actor and director Mathieu Kassovitz is in a worrying condition after a motorcycle crash. He was apparently riding at the Autodrome de Montlhéry, which is a motor racing circuit south of Paris, on Sunday. Now, French media have reported that he was preparing for a role in an upcoming film when he was very seriously injured, including head trauma and a fractured pelvis. It's not clear exactly what happened, but the report in Le Parisien said that one of his daughters was on a motorcycle behind him with an instructor and witnessed the accident. So it seems like he was in training for something. 56-year-old, he's best known for his 1995 film La Haine and his role in the 2001 movie Amélie. He was on a motorcycle training course, a police source told the French press agency. Now, in 2019, Kassovitz told a motoring programme on French TV of his love of motorbikes. He said he'd seen himself more as an intellectual than a sportsman, but after getting his licence at 40, he developed a passion for motorcyclists. So let's hope he makes a full and speedy recovery. Another company which is regularly in the news for all the wrong reasons is Tesla, and it's just been revealed that they're being probed again, this time because the company has apparently rolled out a software update that allows some drivers to use its autopilot driver assist system for extended periods without making them put their hands on the steering wheel. It's not exactly clear how long that is, but it is a development that's drawn concern from the US safety regulators, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The NHTSA has ordered Tesla to tell the agency how many vehicles have received this software rollout, as well as more information on what the electric manufacturer's plans for wider distribution might be. They say NHTSA is concerned that this feature was introduced to consumer vehicles, and now that the existence of this feature is known to the public, more drivers may attempt to activate it. The NHTSA is also seeking reports of crashes and near misses involving vehicles with the software update. An under oath response was required from Tesla by August 25th, but there's no word on whether that actually happened. Now, the government has been investigating autopilot for crashing into emergency vehicles parked on freeways, as well as for hitting motorcycles. It opened a formal probe in 2021, and since 2016 they've sent investigators to 35 Tesla crashes that may have involved partially automated driving systems. At least 17 people have died. Elon Musk tweeted, "If you haven't tried Tesla Autopilot, you don't know how awesome it is." Last Wednesday. Earlier this month, NHTSA sent investigators to a crash in Virginia in which a Tesla, apparently on autopilot, ran under a tractor trailer, killing the driver. Now, as you may recall from previous shows, there's currently discussion about the multi-tiered UK licence system that's in operation at the moment, and whether or not a change should be made to allow riders to upgrade from a lower level licence to a higher licence via training courses run by approved schools. Slightly different story from Malaysia, where the Deputy Prime Minister, Ahmed Zahid Hamidi, he's himself a bike owner and rider. He's proposed giving B2 motorcycle licence holders an automatic upgrade to the full B class. Now, B2 licence is for motorcycles with engines of a capacity below 250cc, so very much like the old UK learner limit, while the B licence allows motorcyclists to ride any capacity, any power motorcycle. So again, very much like the old UK system. Now, he said on Sunday that this proposal would be submitted to the Transport Ministry for review. He said, "I don't think B2 licence holders need to go to another driving test because they are experienced riders. I do not see the need to impose strict conditions." Experts disagree. There were more than 4,000 motorcyclists killed on Malaysia's roads last year, and they say that the bikes are different, that they require a higher level of skill to operate, and they are calling for changes, in fact, to the driving school curriculum by including a hazard perception module in the driving licence test. So in effect, moving closer to the current English model. And perhaps more to the point, and something I'm sure the DVSA are well aware of, if you take out the requirement to take an extra test, the upgrade to the higher level license will have a financial impact to the DVSA in the UK or the Malaysian government over in Malaya. Now, don't forget, these shows go out on Wednesdays and Sundays. They are almost always live, very occasionally recorded, and even more rarely I miss a show. Sunday I will be in the Isle of Wight. I'm hoping to be able to run a show from down there, but do keep a check on the channel just in case I do have to cancel, but hopefully I'll be able to run it as planned. Now, got some comments here to go through. Claire's looked in. Good morning, Claire. Aaron has also looked in, and he says, "I've been stung in the throat while riding. I'm allergic." Fortunately, he said he was very close to a Royal an RNAZF base hospital. Yes, yeah, I am. It's one of the bee stings. I believe I'm right in saying that a lot of people are cumulatively allergic. So, whilst the first bee sting may not have much effect, the more often you are stung by bees, the more severe the reaction can be. And I believe that applies to me. Kevin says, "Good morning. Lots to do, but managed to find time to look in." Well, thank you very much. In fact, Kevin. Terry says, "Patently TfL out of control, if issuing fines in those circumstances. Yeah, the law is the law, and any fine must be levied by legal entities in legal manner." Yeah, it's one of those interesting questions, really, isn't it? The law is the law, and you write a law, but sometimes you don't actually consider all the options, and there should be some flexibility, I think, in a discretion within a law when it could maybe not be applied with full rigour. I seem to remember, don't quote me on this, that a woman actually went into childbirth whilst driving on the motorway, stopped on the hard shoulder to call for an ambulance, and she was actually prosecuted for stopping on a hard shoulder. Giving her birth to a baby wasn't considered to be a reason to stop. And Terry also says he's allergy prone. Yeah, so right, okay, so where was I? Right, well, a couple of shows ago I was talking about the potential for push notifications, that is, data actively sent to a connected vehicle, including a connected motorcycle, where it could be used to inform the rider of issues and hazards along the route before the rider arrives at it unexpectedly in its fullest format, using sort of vehicle-to-vehicle communication. It could even allow the bike and a car approaching a junction on intersecting routes to talk to each other and warn each other of their presence. Now, as it happens, let's get his name right, Yoshihiro Hidaka. He's the president of Yamaha, and he's also the Japan Motorcycle Manufacturers Association president. He's very recently warned of the danger of motorcyclists getting left behind by this technical revolution. Now, he was interviewed by the Japanese website Moto Info, and in the published account of what he said, he answered some interesting questions about the future of motorcycling. Now, referring to this connected aspect of the motorcycle, he said, one aspect that worries us is that motorcycles are lagging behind in technologies such as autonomous driving and digitization. We're referring to trends like V2X, which is vehicle to everything, meaning the motorcycle's ability to communicate with its surroundings, with the environment. If motorcycles fall behind with this technology, the result could be an increase in accidents. Actually says would be, I'll insert a could be there. Why? Well, drivers, if their vehicle is warning them about other cars, will tend to expect it to warn them about everything. And if a non-connected motorcycle is approaching, the danger is that they won't anticipate that and perhaps won't be on their full guard. Now, asked what the strategy in the Japanese motorcycle industry actually would be if they were to pursue this digital transformation, he said, as I said before, it's important that the bike is connected to the environment. The driver receives more and more information. We can use technology to teach driving techniques in a fun way to increase safety. The digital transformation will only deserve the name if it adds value. Right, so quite an interesting comment there, I think, from Japan. Meanwhile, over in Pakistan, the Pak Suzuki Motor Company has been forced to halt motorcycle production for the third time in just a couple of weeks as the company faces an acute raw material shortage. Now, the company originally shut down on July the 31st. That was to run till August the 15th. That was due to inventory constraints. And in fact, it shut down again on August the 18th, so it's literally just a couple of days later. And the manufacturer was then supposed to reopen on September the 1st, but further notice was issued saying that production would continue to be suspended for another 12 days, so they are now supposed to resume production on September the 12th. Now, Pak Suzuki has been grappling with raw material shortages since July of last year. I believe I reported on a previous shutdown from them, and it stems from difficulties importing essential components. Now, experts expect the closure not just to impact the company's workforce, for whom I suspect it's pretty bad news, but also the broader economy. Now, still to come on today's show, don't forget we have the second part of the in-depth session on slow control, so stay tuned for that. But let's move on to motorcycles themselves. Now, as I've mentioned before, the range of Suzuki motorcycles here in the UK has pretty much been thinned out. It's been pruned very, very dramatically in the last couple of years, and we've only had the pair of new twins, the Naked and the V-Strom. They are based on the 800 engine, and that's the only thing that's put any gloss on their catalogue really since the demise of virtually every middleweight in the range, and certainly every single sports bike has disappeared. But there are hints at least one new version of the twin might be appearing soon, and possibly two. Now, the first thing to say is it appears that Suzuki have trademarked the GSX-F logo in Europe. Now, if you remember, this was one of the previous bikes with the GSX-F name. This is the GSX-F 750F. So the implication, I would say, of this trademark is that Suzuki could possibly be looking at a fared sports tourer, sort of a bike with a fairly relaxed riding position, a fairing and possibly a bit of a taller screen than a sports bike, and possibly sporting a genuine two-seat option, and hopefully some luggage carrying capacity. So it's the sort of bike that would appreciate it by somebody who wants to holiday on their bike as well as have a practical all-rounder. So, as I say, the 750 in the picture here, this machine was based around the inline-4 engine. And this bike and its 1000cc sibling, well, they were reasonably good sellers. People didn't care for the looks particularly, perhaps, but it was perfect for riders who wanted a reasonably high-performing bike, but that wasn't a full-on sports bike and really could do a bit of everything. So we've got that to look at, but also perhaps rather more interestingly is that the Japanese magazine Young Machine, who I've talked about before, they generally have a pretty direct line to the manufacturers, and they are often the source of information about upcoming bikes. They also suggest that there is actually possibly a sportier GSX-8R on the way, filling the hole left by the company's now non-existent GSX-R range. Yamaha have also gone this route with the R7, and Aprilia, of course, are marketing their 100 horsepower RS660 as a very performance-oriented twin cylinder. So what can we expect? Well, the chassis and motor undoubtedly going to be the 77683 brake horsepower parallel twin engine that you find on the GSX-8S. But it's possible, of course, that an R model could have an engine remap, a higher peak RPM, perhaps more power, perhaps, and it's also likely, of course, that that bike would get some adjustable suspension, uprated brakes. So, and Paul's looked in. Good morning, Paul. Nice to see you. Hopefully, I'll see you later today. Right, so what have we got? Terry says anything that gets rid of the crab lobster light frontage on the new GSX-8 road bike has to be a bonus. Yes, I tend to agree with you on that one. I don't think they're very pretty looking bikes. So hopefully perhaps you'll like the looks of this one a little better. So let's get that one in shot. Here we go. Let's bring it out. That's it. So this is the Chinese 1000cc bike that I was talking about a moment ago. There we go. Let's get the picture as best I can. Now, if you're in any doubt that the Chinese motorcycle industry really does intend to take on the global market, this new machine, it's the SRK 1000RR, really should put that to bed for you. Now, the Chinese machines have been dismissed as cheap and crude, since they first appeared. And frankly, some of the earlier ones were pretty damn poor. But the last decade has seen manufacturers, CF Moto, one that I mentioned a fair amount, they really have shifted their production up by several gears. And they now do produce machines which I think can genuinely compete on the world stage. Now, of course, many of them share engines with ostensibly European manufacturers like Benelli and KTM. So I don't think there really can be too many questions now about their reliability. The manufacturing standards, they may still be a little bit on the heavy side, perhaps, compared with some of the sort of Japanese machines, but they're getting much and much closer. So this latest tie-up here sees QJ Motor. They are taking the 1000cc engine from MV Agusta, there it is, and they have created their new superbike. Now, it's the 921 engine, which comes from one of the versions of the Brutale, and it produces between 125 and 127 horsepower and 95 newton meters of torque. Now, like Benelli, QJ Motor are owned by the Qianjiang Group, and MV Agusta have a distribution deal with Qianjiang. So it is possible that QJ Motor will be responsible for manufacturing the engines for the 921S and GT that MV are said to be releasing in the very near future. And then they will be able to use the engine in their own bike in return. CF Moto, you'll recall, probably has a similar deal with KTM. Now, MV have shown off this 921 motor in those concept bikes. They are expected to appear 2022. 24. The chassis on the new QJ motor also appears to be part steel, part alloy steel trellis, and it looks like it comes from the Brutale 1000 RS. Suspension is said to be Marzocchi as well, which of course is also owned by Qiang. So if the first reports of the bike's existence came out in the autumn of 2020 and officially the bike is still under wraps, it does appear that we are likely to see that coming with a production run probably as early as next year. Right, okay, so carry on. Right, we're just checking. No more comments, so I can go on to the final section of today's show, which is the slow riding and control, which I started off last time out. Now, you may remember that I showed you this picture of a rider paddling his Ducati around a hairpin bend on the Stelvio Pass. Sadly, somebody filmed him from above and promptly posted it on Twitter. As I said, you really can't hide slow control. If you're footing a bike around a corner like this, it is really a dead giveaway that your slow control is pretty awful. Now, you'll recall that last week I gave you some headings to think about. The first one was forget the cones, remember the skills, and what I was saying here was that CBT and the basic bike training courses for licenses do teach slow riding. Unfortunately, what happens is people get kind of focused on going around cones and they forget that in fact it applies on the real road. The second of these bullet points last time out was slow but not too slow, where I was trying to explain that because motorcycles have dynamic balance created by the fact that they are rolling forwards, as we go slower and slower, we start to lose our dynamic balance. So there's a limit to how slow we can go on slow control. We have to learn where that is. The third bullet point was if you don't lean, you won't turn. Some riders are remarkably reluctant to lean the bike into a corner at slow speed because they think it'll topple over. See the last point there for possible reasons why. But if you don't lean the bike, it won't go around the corner. And so for a really tight bend, the answer is not to ride slower, which may be the intuitive solution. It's actually to lean over more and to exploit the fact that most motorcycles can get over the significant lean angles. If you didn't catch the show, I do suggest that you pop back to my YouTube channel and have a look at it over there. That will be the easiest place to find it. Survival Skills UK is the YouTube URL, and just check the Elevenses channel. Now, this week I want to move on to look at a pair of very simple but very, very useful for improving exercises for improving slow control. Now, don't dismiss these just because they are basic. So the first one is shake it loose posture. Before anything else, this is where it starts. A poor riding position compromises everything, but really compromises slow control. Now, have a look at the rider here. Where's he sitting? Well, reasonably far forward on the bike. There's no need to squeeze up so close to the tank that you're squashing intimate bits into it, but you do need to be sitting close enough that you can get your knees up the side of the tank and you can brace them against it. That way our legs stabilize our lower body. Once our lower body is stabilized, then we can use our back muscles to stabilize the torso above the pelvis. So this brace position, as I call it, allows us to keep various bits of the body that need to be loose. The neck, because we need to look where we're going to go when we go around a tight corner. It keeps our shoulders loose so that we can actually move our arms freely. Our elbows should be loose so that we're not leaning on the bars, and our wrists also need to be loose so that we can operate the controls smoothly. So that's what we want to try to achieve. Even on a sports bike, you can do this. A little bit more difficult when your bars are low down, but that brace position allows you to stiffen your back, and the stiff back allows you to keep the elbows loose, and that keeps your weight off the handlebars. somewhere I had a picture of a bad riding position which I seem to have lost. Okay, never mind. All right, I'll try and put that up later. That's annoying. Now, a poor riding position creates locked elbows. So basically what you would have is a straight line through the wrists right the way up to the shoulder. You wouldn't have that sort of a slight angle in the arms. Now that means that if the bars move, the only way that your body can move is by twisting your shoulders. Think about it. If your elbows are locked, you cannot absorb movement in the bars through the arms, and that destroys slow control. Now, it is tougher on a sports bike, as I've said, but if your arms are straight, you're in a poor riding position. So that's the thing to check. Now, next up, where do you put your feet? It may seem like an obvious question, but don't dangle them. If you've got your feet on the floor, like you saw with this rider on his Ducati a moment ago, it really is a sign of lack of confidence. But some riders actually seem to do it because it's a fashion thing. And I've even seen experienced riders riding around with one foot dangling a few inches above the tarmac. Now, if you do that, basically you are making it far more difficult to lock onto the tank and use that brace position, and it's far more likely that you are going to be resting on the handlebars because the top half of your body has to be supported somehow, and if there's any kind of forward lean in your bike's riding position, then it will end up on the petrol on the bars. So get the foot up, grip the petrol tank, and of course there's always a risk of stubbing a toe when you are riding around with feet dangling like this. Now at best you might end up ripping the sole off your boot, but at worst you could possibly break your ankle and drop the bike. So get the feet up at all times when moving. And the next thing to remember to do is to get your foot over the rear brake. Now this kind of riding position where the foot is a little bit far back on the peg means that it's going to be very, very difficult to operate your rear brake without moving your foot again. So try to get your foot forward. You've usually got sort of some kind of raised area on the sole of the boot. Try to get the weight of the foot on that. Don't ride on the ball of the foot like so many people advise you to do. Get your foot forward, get it over the rear brake, and that will really help your confidence, because what tends to happen when riders are going just a little bit too quick and they need to slow down, well, if they haven't got their foot anywhere near the rear brake, they will use the front brake, and that tends to be too powerful at slow speed. It tends to stop the bike dead, and if you happen to be leaning over at the same time, then it'll topple over. So get that toe of the left boot over the brake lever, and if you can't do this comfortably, adjust the height of the brake lever. They are frequently set too high out of the factory. Have a look at how to do that. It's usually a fairly simple, straightforward screw and lock nut, or an adjustable shaft which operates the master cylinder. But have a look at it, and you can usually adjust it and change the angle of the lever. Lower it down a little bit if you can't use it because it's too high. So keep checking and rechecking your foot is still covering the brake lever. Now fourthly, once you are in the habit of using the rear brake, it's much easier to crack the other bad habit, which is to keep your fingers dangling over the front brake. Now when we are teaching new riders how to use slow control, this is something that we really bang on about. Keep fingers away from the front brake, because once the bike starts to lose a bit of balance, the rider loses a bit of confidence in what they're doing, they will grab the front brake, and of course if it's leaning over, then off it goes to its side. Now it's often easier said than done to persuade experienced riders to avoid having the fingers dangling on the front brake, but honestly the experience is that your first instinct is always going to be to grab that front brake if things start going wrong. Right, the next exercise I call slow, slow, quick, quick, slow, and many experienced riders will skip this completely, and it's a mistake, because if we get this right, everything else gets a lot easier. Now, first of all, work on slipping the clutch in a straight line. Why? because if all we ever do is rely on throttle control, we must keep the throttle absolutely smooth to keep the speed steady. A slight tweak either way will make the bike surge. If we twist it open, it'll stop again if we shut it. So on real roads, if we hit a bump, we often bounce slightly in the seat, and that can be enough to tweak the throttle open. I well remember my CX500 back in the old days. It was absolutely notorious for that. There was a bump at the bottom of one particular little hill which I used to hit, and every time I hit it, I bounced on the seat and I tweaked the throttle and the bike jerked. It took me quite a long while to sort that one out. So keep the throttle steady, but use the clutch instead to find the biting point so that the bike is driving, so that if we do inadvertently tweak the throttle, the revs will go up and down but the bike won't surge. Right, so how do we control our speed once we've got slipping clutch and we are able to tweak the throttle without changing speed? Well, the answer is we use the rear brake. That's why your foot position is so important. That's what controls our speed. With the foot already on the rear brake, we can get the bike rolling in a straight line. So this is our first thing to practice. Get the bike moving, get into that slow control where the throttle isn't actually altering your speed, and then get above the speed at which the bike feels unstable, so it is nice and stable, and then just play with the rear brake. A little added bit of rear brake and the bike will slow down, a little bit less rear brake and the bike will speed up again. So repeat, keep doing it until you can control the bike's speed nice and smoothly with the rear brake. Then add a little bit of speed. Do it slightly faster. Slow down again to the point where the bike is reaching its limits of stability. And again, try, see what happens as you open or tread on and release the rear brake. Come to a complete halt. As you stop, you're going to pull the clutch in, but use the rear brake only to stop. You'll find it stops nice and level. If you use the front brake, the forks will dive. So use the rear brake and you'll find the bike comes to a nice level stop. Pull away again. Repeat. The idea here is to get used to the feel of the bike as it responds to the rear brake. Many riders tend to ignore this very, very simple exercise. Right, now 2 points. This will not wear out your clutch, at least not if you're riding any bike that doesn't have a notoriously fragile clutch. It certainly won't do as much damage to it as pulling clutch up wheelies and things. Now my Hornet has demoed hours and hours and hours of slow control in its 80,000 mile life, and the clutch is still fine. So this really is, secondly, a lot easier to practice in a straight line. Don't start to try this mid-corner yet until you really have got the ability to fine-tune your speed and keep that clutch slipping in a straight line. It sounds too simple to be true, but seriously, if you do these exercises, get this step sorted out, and you really will get off to a flying start when we move on next time out to slow control in corners. Skip it, and many riders do because it seems far too simple, and when they try to turn the bike at slow speed in a confined space, that is when they struggle. So that's it for today. Next time out, we'll be looking at some simple, again, but highly practical exercises where we start to actually make turns in confined spaces. I'll be talking about counterweighting, I'll be talking about the need for a head snap, and I'll be showing you an exercise, the one I call the box, which helps you figure this out, not just for rolling turns but also for pulling away and stopping again. All right, okay, so that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed if you have looked in. Don't forget that what was I going to say? Yeah, oh yes, the weather. Yeah, sunny and warm here in the southeast of England. It's right through into next week, actually. Now, that has encouraged a lot of riders out on weekends. Also, a lot of drivers are been bike collisions around, some sadly fatal ones. So do take care. Also be aware that the police were out in force last Sunday on popular biking routes. I heard about a number of riders being stopped in the Peak District. So, right, okay, if you have enjoyed the show, please do take a moment to subscribe to my channel and to like the video with the thumbs up icon if you're in YouTube. And if you are over there on YouTube, do check out my other videos, including my 60-second science and my 60-second safety series. They all offer really useful information, but in a very quick to watch, easy to digest format. And please do tell people about the Survival Skills channel on YouTube. Share the link to your biking buddies. So that's it for today. Aaron says, looking forward to meeting next week. Looking forward to next week's show. Presumably, slow riding with the feature. Feature very good, says Kevin. Thank you very much indeed. And Claire says, also very useful. Police are out in full force in rural Hertfordshire. Yes, I'm not entirely surprised on that. So that is it. Thank you again for looking in. Enjoy your day out, but make sure that you stay shiny side up.